Hello, my name is Nico Blüthgen and I'm an ecologist and a professor for ecological networks at the Technical University of Darmstadt in Germany. When the wall in Berlin was falling, I was still a relatively young man living in my parents' house in northwestern Germany, and of course I felt very happy immediately that the people in the East regained back their freedom. But I do remember at that very moment actually being very anxious and worried that this may be already a tipping point towards a more nationalist society in Germany, and that we will too easily forget about our history lessons. As a youngster, I enjoyed watching stars, and I was quite sure that I would become an astronomer. I then began to realize that studying frogs and insects is so much more practical and similarly fascinating. Many different types of stars exist, but the variety of species on Earth is so much richer in the different natural histories, social lifestyles, behavior, different body forms, different chemistry. So the whole complexity of nature, of species and mechanisms is a wonderful challenge. I couldn't be happier than now to have the privilege to study various insects in a meadow or in a tropical forest. The human society is facing a lot of problems, and we are building too many walls. One of the largest walls, in my view, and still growing rapidly, is the biodiversity crisis. Thousands of species are going locally or globally extinct. A huge number of wildlife populations or the abundance of insects have declined dramatically over the last couple of decades. Not surprising, since forests are replaced by intensive agriculture or oceans are overfished. On the other hand, these are just numbers. Does it really matter to us if nature or species populations disappear from a region, or if species are even going extinct? So is it really important to maintain such a diversity? The answer obviously lies in the functions of each species, their roles in the ecosystem, and the complexity of networks that they are involved in. For example, over 90% of the plant species require animals for pollination, and 90% of the trees in tropical forests also don't disperse their fruits in an empty forest with no birds or mammals. No doubt this is a disaster for an ecosystem and for using ecosystems on long term if all these species disappear. But do we really need so many species, or isn't just even one species enough? For example, the honeybee, which we can even manage in a hive. Our research contributed to the understanding why the diversity of species and the complexity of their interactions is important for the stability of ecosystems. We're detecting aggregate properties of such networks, properties that go beyond the sum of the components or the single species, and these properties help to translate how richness contributes to the stability of ecosystems. The novelty of our current research, and that of several colleagues, is a contribution to a more quantitative and conceptual understanding of the importance of complexity and specialization in networks. Species differ in their functions in such networks, and they differ when and how they perform particular functions. For example, different species can perform the same function but under different climatic conditions, and a set of many species only can guarantee the functioning when conditions such as temperature or drought are changing. This diversity of responses represents an insurance against disturbances. And the asynchrony of species over time is a buffer against fluctuations of functioning. We have shown such stabilizing effect of diversity and network complexity, for example, in plant-pollinator interactions, and for dung beetles and their important services of burying dung into the soil. As scientists, we are increasingly becoming aware of the dimensions of the problem of losses of biodiversity and how important it is to communicate these insights to society. A better knowledge of how biodiversity contributes to a more stable ecosystem can be applied to build a more sustainable agriculture and forestry, more sustainable resource management and conservation, to ensure food safety and even lower the risk of future pandemics. ecologists have gained a fairly good understanding about what we are losing when natural ecosystems are disturbed or destroyed, how networks collapse, or how ecosystems become dysfunctional. So this is enough knowledge to protect species diversity, for sure. However, we still know very little about how networks can recover when nature is allowed to grow back, and what rules apply to such reassembly. Why are some systems more resilient than others? My group is currently exploring the reassembly in one of the most species-rich and yet most threatened ecosystems on Earth, the tropical rainforest. It is absolutely fascinating and encouraging and keeps us awake to see the potential of so much wildlife to recover, to see when rare or highly specialized species are coming back, if natural forests are allowed to regenerate.